Apply. Ladies and gentlemen, in a move that is already generating heated debate across Washington, apply. President Donald Trump is preparing to sign an executive order that will direct the Department of Defense to once again be known as the Department of War. The order, apply, which he will formally endorse on Friday, does not legally change the official name of the Pentagon, apply, but it does authorize the use of the new title as a secondary designation for both the department itself and for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, apply, who would also carry the title of Secretary of War. This announcement marks a striking return to a name that was once central to America's history. Apply. The Department of War was first established under President George Washington in the year 1789 and remained a cabinet-level agency until 1947. Apply. When it was dissolved and replaced with the Department of Defense following the Second World War. Its revival, even symbolically, raises profound questions about America's self-image. Apply. Its military posture and the way it communicates strength to both allies and adversaries. According to the executive order obtained by the BBC, the justification is clear. The text declares, apply. The name Department of War conveys a stronger message of readiness and resolve compared to Department of Defense, which emphasizes only defensive capabilities. It goes further, apply, stating that this change will sharpen the department's focus on protecting the national interest and send a direct signal to adversaries of America's willingness to wage war if necessary to secure those interests. Apply. Yet this move does not come without complications. Under the United States Constitution, the authority to create or rename executive departments lies with Congress. Apply. This means that while President Trump can direct the Pentagon to adopt the name in limited symbolic usage, he cannot make the rebrand permanent without legislative approval. Apply. The executive order instructs Secretary Hegseth to prepare a package of legislative and executive actions that might eventually support a full renaming. Apply. Though such an effort is certain to ignite fierce debate on Capitol Hill, the cost of such a transformation could be staggering. Apply. U.S. media outlets report that a permanent rebrand might reach into the billions of dollars, covering everything from new signage and uniforms to the redesign of emblems, letterheads, apply, and digital infrastructure across hundreds of agencies. At a time when the Pentagon has already pledged to cut unnecessary spending and reduce bureaucratic waste, apply. The price tag alone could become a political flashpoint. Still, for President Trump, the argument is not only about symbolism, but about identity. Apply. He has repeatedly claimed that America's most decisive victories in the First and Second World Wars were achieved under the banner of the Department of War. To him, apply, reviving the name is a matter of pride and history, apply, as well as a rejection of what he and his allies describe as a Pentagon overly preoccupied with diversity initiatives and what they call woke ideology. Trump insists that the department must return to what he terms a warrior ethos, focused squarely on combat readiness rather than on cultural or social priorities. Apply. The timing of this executive order is equally significant. It follows closely after China staged a massive military parade unveiling new weapons systems, advanced drones, apply, and cutting-edge military technology. Analysts have interpreted the parade as a signal to the United States and its allies, apply, a reminder that Beijing intends to challenge American power in the Indo-Pacific region. Against this backdrop, apply, Trump's decision to restore the name Department of War can be seen as part of a broader messaging strategy. Apply, an effort to project strength abroad at a moment of intensifying great power rivalry. This executive order is also a personal milestone for the president. Apply. It marks his 200th executive order since taking office, underscoring his determination to use the full weight of presidential authority to redefine institutions. Apply, shape public perception, and signal a more aggressive stance on matters of national security. Whether Congress ultimately accepts a permanent renaming remains uncertain. Apply, but there is no doubt that the announcement has reopened a deep conversation about how America defines its military role in the 21st century. Apply. The decision by President Trump to reintroduce the name Department of War is not without historical precedent, and to fully understand its resonance, apply, one must return to the very origins of the American Republic. In the year 1789, under the leadership of President George Washington, apply, the Department of War was established as one of the first cabinet-level agencies. Its purpose was straightforward, apply, to oversee the administration and organization of the United States Army, which at that time was small, fragile, and still defining its role in a new and uncertain nation. Apply, the Department of War stood at the center of the country's defense strategy for over 150 years, guiding the military through early conflicts, the Civil War, apply, in both world wars. The name itself carried with it a sense of clarity, leaving little ambiguity about the department's purpose. America, a nation born through revolution, Apply understood that survival often required the projection of military power. Yet, after the devastation of the Second World War, the global political landscape shifted dramatically. Apply the rise of the United Nations, the birth of NATO, and the advent of the Cold War prompted leaders in Washington to reconsider how America presented its military might to the world. Apply the War Department was dissolved in 1947 with the passage of the National Security Act, replaced by the newly formed Department of Defense. Apply the change reflected not only a bureaucratic restructuring, but also a deliberate attempt to signal to the world that America's military posture was rooted in defense, deterrence, apply, and stability rather than conquest. This linguistic shift was deeply symbolic. Apply, the title Department of Defense, aligned with a broader narrative that the United States sought peace, but would defend itself and its allies when necessary. Apply. It was meant to reassure both domestic audiences wary of endless war and international partners wary of American dominance. Apply. The new framing helped solidify the United States' leadership role during the Cold War. Apply. Presenting the nation not as an aggressor, but as a guarantor of collective security against the spread of communism. Apply. President Trump's move to revive the Department of War therefore represents more than a nostalgic nod to history. It is a reversal of decades of strategic branding. Apply, while he frames it as a return to America's victorious heritage in the First and Second World Wars. Apply. Critics argue that it undermines the post-war consensus that sought to balance power with restraint. To them, the shift risks sending a message of aggression rather than defense. Apply, potentially inflaming tensions at a moment when global rivals such as China and Russia are already advancing assertive military strategies. Apply. At the heart of this debate is the power of language. Names shape perception, and perception shapes policy. By turning back the clock to the era of the Department of War, Apply. Trump is not only reviving a title, but also attempting to recalibrate the narrative of American military identity, one that is less about guarding borders and more about projecting readiness to wage war whenever and wherever the nation deems necessary. Apply. The proposed rebranding of the Department of Defense to the Department of War also opens a constitutional and political debate about the limits of executive authority and the role of Congress in shaping America's institutions. Apply. Under the United States Constitution, the creation and organization of executive departments rests firmly with Congress. Apply. This means that while President Trump can sign an executive order to authorize the symbolic or secondary use of the name Apply, he cannot legally make the change permanent without legislative approval. Apply. His directive instructs Secretary Pete Hegseth to recommend legislative actions that might facilitate such a renaming. Apply. But history suggests that achieving consensus on Capitol Hill will be difficult. This tension between executive ambition and congressional oversight is not new. Apply. Presidents of both parties have often used executive orders to advance their agendas when faced with a divided or resistant Congress. For Trump, Apply, who has already issued his 200th executive order, the rebranding effort fits into a broader pattern of pushing the boundaries of presidential power. Apply, yet the symbolism of renaming the Pentagon cannot obscure the legal reality. Without Congress, the Department of War cannot be formally reestablished. Apply. Lawmakers may view the move as an overreach, especially at a time when the separation of powers is already under scrutiny. Apply. The political implications extend far beyond constitutional mechanics. On one hand, Trump supporters may see the order as a bold assertion of strength and leadership. Apply. An effort to restore a sense of martial pride that resonates with his base. They argue that Congress, which often moves slowly, Apply, has allowed bureaucracy and politics to weaken the clarity of the nation's defense mission. On the other hand, Apply. Opponents in both parties could seize upon the name change as evidence of misplaced priorities. With military budgets under strain, global crisis unfolding, Apply, and alliances needing attention, they may argue that $1 billion rebranding exercise is a distraction from urgent matters of strategy and security. Apply. There is also the broader question of messaging. By acting unilaterally, Trump risks polarizing lawmakers who might otherwise have supported military reforms. Apply. Congressional leaders are already weighing the cost of the rebrand against promises of fiscal responsibility. For many, the optics of spending billions of dollars on renaming agencies, Apply, redesigning emblems, and altering uniforms may be politically untenable, especially when Pentagon officials themselves are pushing to cut waste and modernize operations more efficiently. Apply. At its core, the controversy illustrates the fragile balance of American governance. The presidency is powerful, but it is not absolute. Apply. Congress retains the authority to define the nation's institutions. Apply. And it remains to be seen whether lawmakers will rally behind Trump's symbolic push or resist it as unnecessary and provocative. Apply. The outcome will not only determine the fate of the Department of War, but also serve as a litmus test for the boundaries of executive power in a deeply divided political landscape? Apply. The decision to revive the name Department of War also functions as a calculated act of strategic messaging intended not only for domestic audiences but for the wider world. Apply. In international politics, symbols and language matter as much as military hardware. Apply. And Trump's move can be understood as part of a broader effort to project strength in an increasingly competitive global order. Apply. By adopting terminology that conveys readiness for conflict rather than mere defense. Apply. The administration is sending a clear signal to adversaries that America is prepared to act decisively in the pursuit of its interests. The timing of this announcement is no coincidence. Applied only days earlier, China unveiled a sweeping display of new military hardware, including advanced drones, missile systems, supply and stealth technology in a parade that was widely interpreted as a message to Washington and its allies. Apply. Beijing's demonstration underscored its ambition to challenge American primacy in the Indo-Pacific region. Against this backdrop, Apply. Trump's rebranding initiative can be seen as a rhetorical counterpunch. Apply. An attempt to remind China and others that the United States remains the world's foremost military power and is unafraid to embrace its identity as a nation willing to wage war if required. Apply. This is not only about China. Russia, too, has been testing the resolve of the West, from cyber attacks to aggressive maneuvers near NATO borders. Apply. By choosing language steeped in martial history, the Trump administration seeks to reinforce deterrence. Apply. The underlying message is that the United States is not merely shielding itself from attack, but stands ready to take offensive action should its interests or allies be threatened. Apply. For allies in Europe and Asia, the symbolism may serve as reassurance. Apply, though it could also spark unease among those who fear being dragged into conflicts under a more aggressive American doctrine. At the same time, the domestic audience cannot be ignored. Apply. Trump's political brand has long emphasized toughness, victory, and strength. By invoking the victories of the First and Second World Wars, Apply, he frames America's past military triumphs as a legacy that must be reclaimed. Apply. The narrative is designed to resonate with voters who believe the United States has lost some of its assertiveness on the global stage. Apply. It also plays into his critique of what he calls woke ideology in the Pentagon, contrasting a focus on diversity programs with the raw language of war and combat readiness. Apply. Yet this messaging strategy carries risks. While it may strengthen deterrence, Apply. It could also heighten tensions with rival powers who interpret the change as a sign of growing American belligerence. In diplomacy, words can escalate as easily as weapons. Apply. And renaming the Pentagon could be read by adversaries as a signal that Washington is abandoning the cautious restraint that has defined its post-war role. In this way, Apply. Trump's initiative is both a projection of strength and a gamble. Apply. One that seeks to redefine how America communicates its military power to the world, but may invite unintended consequences in an already volatile international environment. Apply. Beyond constitutional debates and geopolitical signaling, the proposed renaming of the Pentagon also touches a cultural nerve. Apply. Exposing a deeper divide in how Americans view the purpose and identity of their military. Apply. President Trump and Secretary Pete Hegseth have argued that the Department of Defense has become preoccupied with what they describe as woke ideology, including diversity, equity, Apply, and inclusion initiatives. In their view, these programs dilute the warrior ethos that should be at the heart of America's armed forces. Apply. By reviving the title Department of War, they aim to reframe the military as an institution singularly focused on combat readiness, discipline, and the projection of strength. Apply. This cultural framing appeals to a segment of the population that believes the United States has strayed from its martial heritage. For them, Apply. The language of war is not only historically accurate, but also motivational, a reminder of the sacrifices and victories that defined the 20th century. Apply. They point to America's achievements under the banner of the Department of War during the First and Second World Wars. Apply. Framing those victories as evidence that clarity of mission fosters national unity and success. In this interpretation, Apply. Today's Pentagon has become too much like a corporate bureaucracy distracted by social debates rather than preparing for battle. Critics, however, see the issue very differently. Apply. To them, diversity and inclusion efforts within the military are not a distraction but a necessity, ensuring that the armed forces reflect the society they serve. Apply. Modern warfare is as much about advanced technology, cyber operations, and diplomacy as it is about boots on the ground. Apply. They argue that America's strength lies in its ability to harness talent from every community, and that sidelining those values in favor of martial symbolism risks alienating recruits. Apply. Weakening morale and undermining the cohesion of a modern fighting force. The very idea of renaming the Pentagon, they contend, Apply as a culture war gesture designed more for political theater than for genuine reform. This clash over ethos reveals the broader polarization of American politics. Apply. The debate is no longer confined to budgets, weapons systems, or foreign alliances alliances but extends to the fundamental identity of the nation's military? Apply. Is it to be seen primarily as a defensive shield, a deterrent grounded in alliances and restraint, or should it be reimagined as a warrior institution? Apply. Unapologetic about its capacity and willingness to wage war. The answer to this question will shape not only military culture, but also public trust in the armed forces. In the end, Apply, the renaming controversy reflects more than a struggle over words. Apply, it is a struggle over values, about whether America defines its strength through inclusivity and defense or through warfighting prowess and traditional martial pride. That tension, Apply, now symbolized in the name of the Pentagon itself, ensures that the debate will remain a lightning rod for both politics and culture in the years ahead.